it, and they can demonstrate it, and they can expand their thinking to other areas into the application. And I was in probably about 15 classrooms today, just interviewing kids. It was phenomenal. I was blown away. So it's, the cognitive component, again, with the PBL and the whole idea there of autonomy and just the whole student voice and agency was just, you really see it happening in the kids' minds.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And from a very qualitative standpoint, we can really begin to see that both as professional educators and having these conversations. But also, I think it is capable of being assessed. And that is certainly what we want to sort of wrap around tonight to think about, at least have some sense of how we would assess that. And I'm sure we're seeing a lot of this in terms of how they're assessing all their projects at this particular school, right, Rick?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was anecdotal in the sense of a good feel and a good presentation and articulation. Now, these were kids, I mainly saw second through fifth graders and in their presentations and dialogues. But they were highly conversable. They wanted to show their stuff and demonstrate what they knew.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about content. It was about the whole process of learning. And then the question then when we came back in the group is, how do you really know and that there's authentic learning? And that was thrown around a lot. And then how are you going to measure it?
So they're still working out the how to measure part.
That was really, yeah. So that was a good discussion today, how to measure it.
Good. Well, that's fine, because we're starting to learn more and more about that. Yeah. So awesome. Now, the other big thing in that first chapter, I see in the agenda, cognitive apprenticeships. That was a fascinating concept too, that I hadn't really fully explored yet. And I think that there's something to come back to there, especially if you are in the higher ed world, such as your world, Carrie, around, you probably have some pretty deep practicum or some kind of rich observation experiences, stuff like that. I think that piece was interesting. There is a whole chapter in this book on internships, basically, and that sort of learning by being immersed in the situation itself in that really authentic way. But I liked this section didn't stop until it had linked these cognitive science and cognitive skills to the concept of internships and apprenticeships. And I thought that it's not deep at all. They just open the door to that, which I think is like, whoa, wow. Cognitively, what is different? What is happening differently cognitively inside a classroom versus inside the workplace? And I bet there is something cognitively happening different in those two settings. And we certainly build practicums into basically every every professional higher ed program that we run. And so we're clearly putting that in there, but I don't know cognitively how to put all those pieces together. And so I just found that fascinating. So I threw that note in. Now, the other big thing for me that's a big takeaway from chapter 1 is the historical development with sites. Yay! So you people all have to write papers along the way. And I liked it wasn't big, it wasn't long. You can certainly go into this in a much broader way, but I think it's an opening door with a lot of sites to you on sort of the historical development of this concept of deeper learning. And I think if any of you are thinking about future work and research and dissertations, whatever, that are going to be close to this space, like that would be a really useful section, I think. So now I loved it, of course, because I'm becoming a historical junkie on deeper learning and just going back further and further. Currently reading a lot of Deborah Meyer, who was really into democratic schooling. So tasty. Although I can't say I completely get my head around the concept yet. As a quasi school leader at STEAM, like she is going further than I currently feel comfortable going in terms of just letting the community make all the critical decisions. So, okay. That was the big things for me from chapter 1. So as you go back, those are 2 useful pieces to look for if you haven't looked for them already. if there are other pieces there, great. Otherwise, chapter 1 is sort of a nice articulation of the broader thing that's happening here with deeper learning, and easily citable, right? So as you are now sort of looking for academic literature to cite to on what is deeper learning, how is this thing progressing, this is a great citation for that particular task. Good questions? Otherwise, can we leave chapter 1 behind us? Sorry, I don't do this part of class well. Someone needs to coach me up on how to force you guys to do more talking as we discuss these chapters. What do the other professors do that I'm not doing? Are they better at instructional wait time? They just sit and look at you for a while?
It's 5:30, sorry.
It's 5:30. I don't know what that means.
Brain's tired. So you can assign us. Hey, I vote Will would go ahead and take the next chapters.
Oh, all right, awesome. Will, it's on you.
Good job, Will. All those in favor? There we go.
I think that what the chapter said was immediately obvious and transparent, and so I think that that's class.
Okay. Scares me that you're making some kind of broader statement there that I'm not fully grasping.
You missed intuitive, Will.
Yes. Very intuitive.
Yeah.
All right. With that said, let's get our hands back into performance assessment a little bit more. And so this is the chapter that sounds like at least more of you caught more of this chapter. I can't say that I'm in love with all of this. I'm still processing myself. This is a new author for me, and I've done some other reading of what this author has previously said, and I'm going to bring a little bit of that into class tonight because I'm really trying to reconcile this college readiness component that he was a huge fan of with the broader performance assessment concepts. And so I'm in my own head trying to put those two pieces together again. But still, here's another quite academically rigorous, lots of citation chapter on a deep, important concept within this broader movement. So for that alone, I love it. So, all right, let me do some instructional wait time. What are the big takeaways for you before I bring a couple out that I think we should talk more about?
I did like
there you go, Andrew.
There we go. I did like this chapter also did talk about the historical context, and like I think you mentioned this 2 weeks ago. Before World War I, they actually had these performance assessments, and they actually kind of like mimicked what we were initially talking about. But I did like that, and then it just worked. I did like how it worked through just all the different types of assessments. But I personally did like the keys to college and career readiness, because I think a lot of times high schools, the main focus for them is to get students to college, but not necessarily transitioning, like preparing them to actually be successful and obtain a degree. And so I think like at least this is starting to hit at the idea of like, okay, what are we doing to get kids not only to, if they're going to go to college, to get them college, but actually to be successful and like get a college degree and move on from there. So at least this is going in that direction.
Good. So that was appealing to you, that
Yes.
linkage into the college readiness measurements, or that kind of a broader thinking around college readiness, which is where most of this dude's work has been over time. This particular author's work has really been deep around college readiness assessment. Okay, go ahead, Rick.
A little bit of a cynical moment here. Are colleges really transitioning in the idea and in the realm where they're engaging students for deeper learning, Justin? I mean, I don't see a lot of evidence of that with the students that I've sent off to college. It's still content, it's still lecture, it's still the assessment of drill and kill, assess on an objective level. Now it depends on the class.
Mm-hmm.
Colleges haven't seen
Well, we have college people in the room. Let's let's let them respond to colleges. We're not seeing much evidence from you of this.
My very jaded perspective is, and I come from a professional master's program. That's the unit that I work in, the primary degree. In the more traditional classes, I really kind of agree with Rick. It's gotten better, but for up until 5 years ago, one of our required courses, the student assessment was quizzes. And, you know, I mean, there is some content that you need to learn, and there are some facts that you need to know. There's some terminology that you need to know, especially in a professional master's degree, which is different than maybe a liberal arts undergraduate degree. But in our school library program, where you have this practicum and you have this observational kind of thing, there I think you get more into more rich application of knowledge as opposed to just fact regurgitation.
But is that at the master's level?
Yes.
That's still at the master's level. I guess part of it in the discussion today about the enriched PBL and the experiences in there. You know, this is an elementary school where I was tomorrow, I'll be at the high school. But again, they talk about collaboration, communication, the 4 C's, and how that's college ready. And I thought, well, that's a stretch because we're talking about elementary kids. But on the other word, I didn't counter it. But still, you know, what really is the higher educational experience requiring of these students to come into the college with the 4 C's, with the deeper learning?
I guess, I mean, for me personally, I mean, I just got out of college, my undergrad, 4 years ago.
You are young.
So I guess I can somewhat speak to this point of just being there only 4 years ago. I will say that, like, the key cognitive strategies and the key learning skills and techniques and transition knowledge, I think, are crucial for college, because if you have the ability, if you have ownership of your learning and you're motivated and self-regulated, and I think there's a quote in here, and it says, and the capacity to advocate for oneself in a complex institutional context. I think it doesn't matter necessarily how much content knowledge you have going into college necessarily, but if you have the ability to advocate for yourself and you have these learning skills and techniques down, then I think you're going to be able to survive and actually thrive in college. And I think that's what I witnessed. And I do witness, there was a lot of collaboration. I went to, a Division I public university, and there was a ton of collaboration. You had to work with other people online, in groups. So I guess maybe that was just what I experienced. But I do think that's why I guess I connected with these 4 keys that he had.
Okay. Let's get Jonathan and Carrie, and Jonathan first.
I would say, Rick, in some instances, there's no deeper learning really being addressed at the college level. In one of the blog posts we had to do about TPAC, I talk about I've been out of college for 20 years, and when I went back, the big change was we went from a chalkboard to a whiteboard. I mean, I observed classes some of my colleagues were putting on, and they would come into the classroom, take out the book, work through 4 problems, and never provide how do you take what you're learning from these 4 problems and apply it to another subject area. And other people, and I'm going to pretend like I know it all and did a great job, but I know I had much improvement to get to. But I could take my land surveying class and some of the math background that goes into it. I could say to students, okay, so now we've done this. Who's had physics? Who's had another class called strength of materials? Do you see how this math applies in the same exact method, but you're just kind of changing the idea that you're applying it to? And then start telling them other classes to watch out for that. You're going to apply this information in a variety of ways. So I think it all comes down to, we've still got individuals who want to come in and do, and it's really bad in engineering and engineering technology. They want to come in and teach exactly how they learned 40 years ago. But then on the flip side, as I was reading through these readings we had, I kept thinking to myself, I've heard how schools are transforming. We're getting the people to this point where they're doing collaboration at the high school level. They're getting them better prepared for college. And you need to change your college teaching to kind of match this collaborative learning they've been getting in high school. And I still had students come in and sit in their little rows, look forward with their books out. And then if I brought a project in and said, okay, team up in groups of 3, they were just looking around like they've never worked together before. So I think there's still a disconnect in both levels that it's going to take work to finalize. You know, it's an ongoing process.
I agree with you, Jonathan. I think one of the things in higher education is you're very knowledgeable about your subject area. Your content knowledge is very high. It's in my experience going into teaching, I didn't know what pedagogy was. And I think that happens in a lot of cases, that you kind of go in and you teach the way that you were taught. And there's lots of students, so you're dealing with high numbers of students, especially in undergraduate. And I just don't think we have the conversations about deeper learning in higher education. I mean, it's certainly out there, but I don't know that it's as prevalent. It's not as in your face. We have technology, but it's not used appropriately. And, you have people teaching the same things that they've been teaching for years and years and years. And, they don't want to change. They've got a cushy job, and they come in and do their thing, and then they go out and do their research. And so I definitely feel that it needs to be this wave, and this push for deeper learning and collaboration definitely needs to make its way up through the ranks. And, and I'm in physical therapy, which should be collaborative, and it should be a lot of deeper learning. And there definitely are parts. But, the benchmark of success of a program is how well they do on the board exam, which is a multiple choice, 200-question multiple choice test. And it's really just to make sure that they're safe when they get out and practice. It's really like a check for safety more than anything.
Yeah, good discussion. This is super complex. I don't know, Rick. I see some movement, but generally also not as much movement as you would think we would be seeing. But it's someone else's baby for me in particular, because working in higher ed, you see what Jonathan and Carrie were sort of getting to, which is these institutions are even more difficult to change than P12, which is, I know, probably hard to imagine for you in the P12 world. But higher ed is extremely difficult to change. The content expert thing you bring up lives deeply at the heart of it, where they don't view their job as teachers as much as for us at a research university, as much as they view their job as a content researcher in that particular field. Now, what they're doing is inquiry, right? What that research is at its core are inquiries. They're conducting inquiries, right? They're trying to solve cancer or whatever the heck that particular research challenge might be on a given day. And the way that they go about that research is through inquiry methodology, right? They are asking a great driving question, authentic, hopefully has authenticity, right? As we layer those pieces tonight around what makes a great project-based experience, much of that lives in the research that happens at the research university. Unfortunately, most students are not experiencing that as part of their sort of general higher ed experience, right? That research, for the most part, for faculty, lives entirely separately from the teaching enterprise, for better or for worse. I mean, it is what it is. It's going to be hard to change, but I do think they are trying. These are very, very bright people for the most part. And so when they're exposed to new ideas, I find them to be open to them, but you need to explain all the science, right? So that's why you need the literature. You need those cognitive science linkages, because if I go to another PhD and say, I need you to change your teaching practice, they're not just going to take my word for it. They're going to want to see like all the science that goes with it. So, but I sense that they can. There's also deep equity issues the parts of higher ed that are changing right now are the really expensive parts. The parts that are really, what?
I don't understand that. Yeah, what does that mean?
That means that at Center College, you're likely to have some great inquiry learning experiences. There are colleges out there like Olin College or Babson in Boston who build the entire curriculum. Olin is an engineering college. I don't know, Jonathan, if you know of it or not, but it builds the entire experience is project-based from the day you walk in to the day you exit. And so those things are changing, even down to the teaching and learning level, but it's a $40,000 a year entry fee.
Yeah.
So that's the equity issues around deeper learning in higher education are much more overt than the equity issues in deeper learning and in P-12 education, it's all there, but in the higher ed level, it's super overt. You can get deeper learning. You're going to have to pay a lot for it.
Yeah. I guess, again, my only point, not to belabor it, but with the kids that I have interviewed that have gone off to UK or the other schools that they've graduated from, they haven't had the exposure to that, certainly in the entry-level classes, and again, those are large lecture halls. But the thing that I know that they have gained is in the deeper learning phenomenon is that they know how to think more deeply, broadly, in a different dimensionality that a content-based traditional drill and kill type school, that doesn't teach thinking. So I know what we're doing at the P-12 level is the right direction. It's just there's still this culture clash, and there still hasn't been a catch-up or a transition at higher ed in many respects. Not all. That's too broad of a statement. It's just, again, 200 students, they have not had that great of an experience in those scenarios in a public education. Yeah, you're right about some. I've heard all about that.
Yeah, multiplied by the fact that most higher education is not happening at UK. It's happening at community colleges, regional universities, right? And so even if you could get your research universities to wake up, that's not the core of higher ed. The core of higher ed lives in the community colleges and regional spaces. So, I mean, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do that we can be certain of. All right, a couple of things here's a couple of things I like about this particular chapter. It takes a super broad view and it brings in lots of different components of assessment, which I do like. Now, I can't say I completely agree with it because sort of the more traditional components of assessment are not treated with the sort of angst that I myself as an author would want to treat them. But nevertheless, I feel like at least there is a broad picture that is painted here that I think was good to think about a broad understanding of the whole systems of assessment. So I loved that. I liked that part because I'm not quite sure yet how comfy I am with some of the more standardized parts that might still live in his vision of a deeper learning assessment system. So other thoughts? Okay, what else? I got some other things on my agenda. What else are we pulling out of this chapter? Yeah, the 4 college and career readiness thing, think, know, act, go, act, go. That is super critical and key to the work that he's particularly pushed. So I like it, but I can't quite completely link that up directly to a system of performance assessments. The acting part in that model makes a lot of sense in terms of where to link performance assessment in, but I don't see it deeply linked enough yet. So I think there's still some stuff to be worked out there. But nevertheless, again, what you're getting in this chapter is a lot of citation and a lot of references to go to, and that broad picture to help us think about what are the various components of assessment that we are thinking about as we think about these kinds of models. And I really was intrigued by this concept of a systems of assessment, which I must admit was new to me, even though now that I've done some homework on it, should not have been. So I feel like I should have known about this more than I did, but nevertheless, I'm learning now. And so I was intrigued by this systems of assessment sort of thought process in a broader concept of what are the layers of assessment that you want to layer on top of a particular learning platform, whatever that is, higher ed or P12 spaces, early childhood, whatever suits. And what are those layers, and what is each layer doing? What is each layer bringing to you, and how narrow and deep are those various components of a systems of assessment approach, which I found interesting. And so I did some more work on that, and I linked up another article that just went super deep on that concept alone with him and Linda Darling-Hammond there in the agenda. If you, like me, were really intrigued by what was a relatively small point for him, but really caught my attention, which is maybe we're thinking about performance assessment still too narrowly, and that there needs to be this broader systems of assessment. Anyway, the dude's clearly thought about assessment way more than most people on planet Earth, and I think there's certainly a lot to digest there that can be useful to you all, hopefully, as you move forward in all your different worlds and spaces, right? In the higher ed spaces, as Carrie, Jonathan, and Will, as you guys are thinking about in your own academic programs, what are the assessments that are partnering with it? What are the different layerings of assessment? You know, what's the assessment that's living inside the classroom experience? What's the assessment that's living at various checkpoints along our continuum, our class coursework? And what is the sort of final big portfolio assessment that we might be doing?
Well, Justin, I was going to ask you, with the systems of assessment, isn't that kind of similar to the graduate profile in terms of, I guess I drew some similarities between the two.
Interesting. Yeah. For me, those would still be distinct. And we're going to do that exact thing next.
Okay.
Linking graduate profile through assessments to an endpoint. That's our exact next task. So the other layerings of the assessment that are going with it, the more common core assessments, the more standardized assessments, or college readiness assessments, I guess that could live in some kind of college readiness portfolio, potentially. I don't know. See, that's not completely clear in my head yet, but I'm looking for guidance from any of you. Like maybe maybe these pieces fit clearly for you.
Well, isn't with the Envision schools, didn't they have, there was that one quote about the fact that when you take your driver's test, you still have to take the computer component, and then the performance, so when your standardized tests you still have that component of it, but then you would also have the other components such as research papers and portfolios and everything like that you could assess.
Yeah, I think what I struggle with as just the sort of reformer that I am is I feel like we already focus plenty on the standardized side of that equation. And it's hard for me to, as we think about a system of assessments, say, yeah, we need to be also spending a whole lot of time on the standardized side. I feel like we already spend plenty. I don't want to spend any more time on that side. Whatever we have is fine. Stop. I don't even really want to innovate more on that side. I just want to give the state some kind of number that makes them feel comfy. Now we're going to have a stars system in Kentucky. Each school is going to be given an Amazon star rating. And so, they're going to have something to give us some stars on. But I don't know how, I know. And see, that's a flaw in my thinking. I know it's a flaw in my thinking, but for me, I'm struggling to put it all together. Sorry. It might make more sense. I think in each academic program in higher ed, there is more sense to be made here. In a space like Carrie's system of, a clear entry point, a clear exit point, all of which is happening within the course of a year and a half or 2 years or whatever that academic program is, the layering of assessments, the systems of assessments that happen throughout that, I think make a whole lot more sense to me than the mega project that is P12. And, all of the different layerings of assessment that need to live within the mega project that is P12. For me, that's still a little bit of a too big of a fish to swallow. I have to think about smaller pieces yet. Anyway, okay, so to play this out further, let's roll into our next activity to transition us from performance assessment into some inquiry, but I want us to think about how all these pieces link together. All right, and so this gets us back into the Envision Schools, Transforming Schools book that Envision has put out, Bob Lenz, Justin Wells. This is a particular activity I picked up from Justin Wells specifically. So he was in Kentucky not long ago, and we're working on performance assessment issues. This was an activity that he helped to lead that, honestly, we are just in love with, and we are running here in Kentucky. So I'm sure he's okay with it. But anyway, I just want to give credit where credit is due. This one was really developed by him. Now, I've digitized it because, that's what we do in UKSTL. But nevertheless, so all this, you have to imagine all this happening on poster paper, and now it's going to happen digitally. So I want to put you out into 5 groups. We're just going to go, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 4 groups tonight. So disregard group number 5. I want to put you just in pairs. I just want to work in teams of 2, tight teams right now. And I want the pair of you to pick one or the other's program, okay? And I'm going to sort of purposefully group tonight to try to put you together in ways that might make more sense. Pick one or the other's program and go for a diversity of programs, right? So I'm going to encourage Amy as our elementary rep to help bring something out. Bring something out at high school, maybe, Andrew, and then one of our higher ed educators bring something out at the higher ed level. Now, what I want to do, remember we spent some time on graduate profile. We started the first book with graduate profile, and we asked you to define that in a blog post. Okay, those pieces now come in. And I want you to take one of the graduate profile pieces, so link into one of those Google Docs. It doesn't matter which one right now, because you're going to close it and I'll put you in the right room in a minute. So what you'll see inside of one of those Google Docs is there's 3 big columns leading to a portfolio, leading to a defense. All right, so this is sort of a systems of assessment, but we're still within a school, within a particular academic program. We're not thinking as holistically as like state assessment as the chapter was willing to talk about. So we're still within an academic program. So you have, hopefully at this point, identified some graduate profile skills. Those profile skills then should be linked to activities that kids are doing. And for now, I just want you to play with that idea. We're going to start to explore that more after this. But for now, put some placeholders there around what would the project be, and then what is the assessment that is going to tell us whether or not that profile skill has been accomplished, that we can then put into a portfolio that a kid is capable of defending at a checkpoint or at a final defense, whatever that might be. So we do exactly this in things like our principal program, as low level as that thinking is. So in our principal program, we have ISLIC standards that we have to meet, and then we design assessments that are supposed to articulate whether or not this particular standard is met. And then there's projects that are supposed to bring that assessment out. Okay, so this is the time to practice this layering. So let's take about 15 minutes here and layer in pairs out a couple of profile skills. So that is, and the place I want you to spend the least amount of time on what is the project. But I put the layer there because that layer lives there. And we need to be able to speak to that layer. But right now, if you really just want to focus on the profile skills and performance assessments that can tell us about that profile skill and let the project sort of emerge later, okie dokie. But I want you to know it's there. But spend the least amount of time on that middle column, okay? Okay, while you do that, I'm going to pull up, I just did this thing myself at Steam, which I might have left at home, which I'm probably going to need for tomorrow. That sucks. I'll have to figure out how to do that digitally. But I think I've got a digital copy of that. And I'll show you one that I put together as we get back into class. Okay, so let me put you out into groups. Questions?
One question. Should this reflect what's actually happening or what we think should happen?
No, I want you to be thinking about the profile skills that you wanted to happen. Now, those might align pretty closely to what you currently have. For some of you, it did, right? And so that there could be some very quick pieces where you feel very comfortable with, I already am comfortable with this profile skill, this assessment, and this project. It actually works well in our program right now. We don't need to change it. But there might be other parts of your program that do need a little love and attention, and that would be a good time to give them. This is a good time to give them a bit. So, okay, now people are already writing. Slow down. I want to put you into groups, into 4 rooms, and I'm going to manually assign. So I feel that we might put Amy and Norman together sort of in the earlier spaces. Are you guys okay with that?
Sure.
All right, thanks, Amy. And maybe, Amy, since you're a principal and you guys have pushed forward on this front a little bit, maybe help lead a little on that one? Okay with that?
Yes.
You okay with that, Norman? Okay, awesome. Or feel free to go the other way too if you want to say no. All right, I'm going to go Andrew and Donna together, both more in the P12 spaces. So hopefully speak together. Rick, you're going to have to be my swing man here a little bit tonight. I think I'll go Carrie and Jonathan, and Rick and Will. You okay with that? And Rick,
Rick and Will were group 4. Is that it?
Yeah, group 4. Group 4 for you. So all the rooms are open now, and then work on that Google Doc assigned to your group, and for Rick and Will, go with Will's. Jonathan and Carrie, I would probably go with Carrie's, since Jonathan, you're not as actively in the higher ed space at the moment. Good? Go. All right, for Garrick and whoever is watching on video, they are out working on this sort of performance alignment activity that we have. And I put copies in the agenda. You'll be able to link and see that work later on. For now, just hang out while they're out doing some group work.
And you'll go with group 1. You'll link on to that.
Yep.
And it should pull up the drawing.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. And I forgot to say that down below that little chart, there is a link to the Noun project. The Noun project has amazing icons. And so that's an easy sort of copy paste from the icon into that Google Doc the Google drawing that you're working on.
Okay.
See where that is down there? So you don't have to create artwork.
Okay.
You can just sort of pull icons and put arrows in and point things to one another.
That's cool.
It is. It's really, really cool. If you click on an icon, then it's hard to copy. Just copy it from the long list on the first page.
Gotcha.
Now, if you love this site like I do, then sign up and try to get these people to do this work a little bit of love. But for now tonight, just copy them. It's fine.
Gotcha.
Okay, good. Feeling okay? Norman, you feeling okay?
Yeah.
All right, so you okay looking at a few elementary outcomes that
Sure.
Amy's probably working on anyway right now?
Sure.
Okay, good. And maybe, Amy, pick some things maybe more around the 5th grade level that might make more sense to Norman than the kindergarten level.
Okay. So
Right.
just in general, some of the things that we identified as our outcomes, I mean, we had specific academic standards, obviously.
I forgot to tell you guys that below the link, below that little chart in the agenda, I put a link to the Noun project, which you guys remember sharing at the Doc Week,
Yes.
which has all these amazing icons. So that would be a good tool to use to pull in graphics to help show what's happening.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right. One more window open. I'm reaching my maximum.
Slightly confused. All right. We'll make it
Suffering from the
happen.
U of L decompression today? I don't know.
You're right.
Well, both of us are living in Louisville. Is that why everybody was driving distracted today?
Yes.
They click an update on their phone, like, is there going to be a University of Louisville basketball program next year? I think that is on the table right now.
I'd say, well, it's good. It's a great question, Justin. I was trying to navigate that and also try to be active on. Hopefully, you've seen me. I'm trying to be active on Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
I like
it. Okay. I'm trying to. I even reached out to Carmen, and she.
But you definitely asked an eggshell question on Twitter, by the way.
Which one?
I dodged, but it was so. When you're like, this is cool, amazing, I said, well, the really amazing part's going to be when they show their work in April. And then you were like, okay, so when is that? That's a problem with Jefferson, right? Like, they're not confident enough. I'm completely
gotcha.
This is our 7th year of Next Gen. I know we're going to have amazing stuff to show. Like, I'm ready to invite the Courier Journal. I have no problem with that. But they do. Right, so I just sort of no, we don't know. It'll be soon. Don't worry about it.
I did ask in the graduate profile. I asked Carmen if it's going to involve a portfolio before defense, and so she did say we hope so. So that's hopefully good.
Yes. Oh, certainly that is her outcome that she's trying to obtain.
Yes.
There are layers of Jefferson bureaucracy to pass through before then.
Yes.
And I think that also there's a real decision here to be made between what do we mandate from central office and what do we try to let emerge from the schools themselves.
And you're also trying to balance the fact that they haven't committed to who's going to be the superintendent yet, even though it looks very hopefully good that Polio will retain it. They're still balancing that. So and because I wonder, if Polio doesn't, let's say the Polio, worst case scenario, Polio doesn't get it, does Carmen stay?
No.
See, and that's the thing. So
that Felicia probably doesn't stay.
Right.
And there's some more hires that are in the works. They don't stay. So, this, the board is in a spot where if they decide not to go this direction, then they're really at a start over point.
Yep. But
it's their choice to make, man.
If I will say they will have a lot of backlash if they decide not to go with Polio. But that's sorry, I didn't mean to.
Total aside. All right, back to work.
Anyways, back to work. Okay.
Try to articulate some stuff at the high school level. I know in Donna's spaces, probably several of the Catholic schools in town have sort of already built frameworks in similar to this. So try to marry some of that work with something that might make sense at a public space like you're in, Andrew.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, go for it.
Okay.
All right. Profile skills, communication, collaboration. What about, I was going to say.
Hey.
I've lost my friend.
I know. I'm sorry. As soon as he pops back in, I'll put him back in here, okay?
Okay.
But in the meantime, just rock and roll, building off of what you guys are already working on.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to make it graphic. I mean, words are fine, but also don't be afraid to throw some graphics in.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll work.
Sorry, I'll put him back in as soon as I see him pop back up.
Okay, no problem.
He's struggling with how techy this program is.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't slow down. We don't apologize. You just need to get it.
Right.
And this is his first class. And so
I get it.
Keeping up.
That's like I feel like with my kids sometimes. I feel like they're that far ahead of me sometimes. So it's all good.
Yep. Okay. I'll circle back around.
Internships. It's another project, I guess that would be.
Yep. I mean, certainly internships is a great inquiry sort of project that exists. How do we assess that on the back end?
We have an assessment that the clinical instructors fill out and the students fill out, and all these standards that they have to achieve in their internship, like communication, professional behavior, critical thinking. So there's a whole bunch of them. I don't know them all, but that's how it is assessed. And, it's really assessed by the clinician that's in the clinic. So, we don't have it's really random how they're
Yeah.
paired up. And so it's not like we're in charge of those clinicians. That's the downfall.
Right.
So some people have really great experiences and some people, don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're always going to get some of that variation just based off of working with the public. But at that end point, at that assessment point, what steps could happen to make that assessment point more robust? And ask the student to be more articulate about what learning actually happened. That's always a struggle with internships, and we feel it at STEAM. We love our internship program, but we always struggle with how do we know what happened, and how can we directly tie that to the learning outcomes that we've been trying to achieve here? We know there's value. We're going to keep doing it. We love the value that we get from it, but we're not extremely good ourselves, even at STEAM, about saying this kid achieved this outcome on the internship, but not this outcome on the internship. And so what we've done is put a layer of presentation on that, which is judged by both our personnel and by the clinician person, the internship person that they're living in. Right? So we've been trying to deal with it that way.
We do have a case report, and that's the first thing we have listed here. So they have to pick a patient on their internship and come back and write a case report on it.
Okay, so case report strikes me as that is the product that's emerging, right? That's the thing that's going to be assessed.
Okay.
Right? And the inquiry is sort of this experience with diving deep with a patient. Right? Is that what's happening? They're going deep with one patient? Yeah. So that's more of the inquiry here, and the driving question in that inquiry would be something more like, how do we understand and have empathy for a patient who is coming to our physical therapy offices? Something like that.
Okay.
All right. And okay, one thing I forgot to say in whole group is down at the bottom, and Jonathan, you can sort of maybe help carry on this front. There are a link to this link called the Noun Project, and you guys remember this from Doc Week. The Noun Project is this place that has all these amazing icons. It's the biggest sort of icon set in the world. And so when you type in something like effective communication, there's probably an amazing icon for that. And so you could sort of make this graphic without a whole lot of effort. Right? Okay, good. Go bring some of that in.
Okay.
With the journal, the year of publication, it's all of the information about the article.
So it's like a very abridged abstract.
Abstract would be part of the metadata.
Okay.
So everything that goes into constructing the record that would then be searchable to help a user find that.
Okay, so it's the key parts that then the identifiers.
Yes.
Okay.
So what our students have trouble with is understanding how you set up that metadata and what you define as metadata and what you decide to include or exclude as metadata significantly impacts the retrieval of that information.
Okay.
Right? So if you decide, I'm not going to include the author's last name, we just need their first name, then a user who's
that wouldn't be good.
Articles by Burslem would never find anything because they think the last name should be included.
Got it.
Love it. You guys have a lot of good stuff going here already. And I sense a good conversation, so I'm mostly going to stay out of it. The one thing I didn't say in whole group that I wanted to say and forgot was down at the bottom of that chart on the agenda, in the bottom of that orange box, is a link to the Noun Project. And if you remember at Doc Week, when we were doing our Smackdown at Doc Week, we shared this tool. It's this amazing list of graphics. So you can bring icons that represent these ideas in very quickly.
So are we talking with that, Justin? I'm looking at is this in the chart?
At the bottom of that chart, below Rick and Will, then Group 5, then use icons from Noun Project with the link.
Oh, okay. I got it.
And then you just type in, so I see some of the stuff that is up there that you guys have is like theory-based research project. Okay, so good. Maybe there's something around theory, an idea or something that might represent that concept well. You might still leave the text, I don't know, but it certainly would make it more graphical and interesting. So,
Okay.
All right, so good. And we're getting, you guys are way ahead. You're doing great work. So there's only about three or so minutes left. So
Thanks for putting me with Will, man. That's all it is.
Well, that's good. Well, but I think Will can speak very tightly to the questions you were having about higher ed.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of growth in higher ed, but I also think there are programs like what Will's doing that are at least thinking about these things and starting to try to link pieces together. It is a master's degree, right? It's not bachelor's, but at least it's something. It's part of higher ed that is trying to figure it out.
Indeed.
Tell me I have to create an account to get these images.
When you dive in, when you just pull it up, you can grab it from that homepage. I use it enough that I did get an account. You can still get them free, but just when you type in your initial search and it pulls up a long list, you can just copy from there.
Okay.
All right. Hey, let's use the sailboat. That's a good metaphor. All right. So we have to substitute the script, but hey, let's.
Oh, good. Hi, Norman.
Right in the middle of all that. It's just AT&T. Sorry about that.
Oh man, don't even. I hate AT&T at a level that I didn't really think I could hate things. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm full, so I should be good on mine, but sometimes it happens.
Yep, you have to go reset the whole thing, and it's a joke. Anyway.
All right, awesome. Maybe about 2 more minutes, guys.
Okay.
Amy's got a lot of progress already happening.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And Amy's loving the noun project, which I love. That's good.
I do. It's fun. I didn't know it existed, so there you have it.
Yeah, another new tool. A new tool for you too, Norman, if you want to do it. It's a great place to find those little icons. As you can see what Amy's doing, she's pulling all those icons. This website called the Noun Project, what they're trying to achieve is an icon for each noun. So, you know, if you put a noun in, they're trying to have an image that represents that noun.
That's a lot of icons.
Do I have a master's degree in English? No, I quit that halfway. Anyway, I took some linguistics courses, and it's really fascinating, like emojis and how much of our English language is starting to move towards iconography, which is much more like the Chinese language, right? Like this kind of a thing actually reminds me this was what Chinese is, or Egyptian hieroglyphics, which just used icons rather than all of the written words out.
Right.
Anyway, that is completely removed from what we were doing, but a little bit of linguistics coming in tonight.
Gotcha.
All right.
I'm trying to get back into that Google Doc. The link, is it over here on the chat still? Or,
I'll put it up in your chat. I'll put the link in your guys' chat because you guys, I want to just shortcut this. So here is your link to the Google Doc that Amy is working on right now, and I'll put a link to the chat, to the agenda.
Wow, okay, great.
So that first one is a link to the Google Doc, the Google drawing, and the next one is a link to the agenda.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
All right, good. Wrapping up, about 1 minute or so, guys.
Okay. I like these. Do you think any other skills want to add to this? Communication, collaboration. I was gonna say, you're not drinking right now, right, Donna? That's Justin. There's okay.
We're drinking. Yep. Sorry.
Okay, I was like, hold on 1 second.
I'm just listening in, and I'm finding this. I'm finding when I did this, the picture of the one that I was trying to build for Steam.
I saw that one. What was it? I think Christy Fields tweeted that the new Steam school had the best. There was some sort of awesome data that she had. I can't remember what exactly she put.
I mean, come on, Andrew. Of course we have some awesome data.
Well, it's getting a little deep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Among the top in the district in ACT growth. Oh, you look at that. You're trying to be a STEAM school, but yet you're bragging about ACT scores. Come on now.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sorry, because we
You have
also
to live with feet on both sides of that pond, don't you?
Yeah, we do, because we're a little bit like Donna's school. We're a school of choice, and so we have to market ourselves to the public, right? And so, especially when you have the high ACT scores, it's damn hard not to market them.
Yeah.
That is very true. That is.
Yeah, you'll see our schools, where they'll talk a little bit about, their ACT scores, and they have the low score. I think the lowest high school score is something like in the 20s somewhere, which is not bad.
Yeah.
For the school average. Now, I'm sure we had this conversation at lunch yesterday about the students. If you have a student that is in the 1 percentile on the high school placement test, then what is a realistic expectation for that student at graduation? It's not a 24 on the ACT.
Yeah.
But that student has progressed, and they can still exhibit progress in terms of performance assessments.
Yeah, for sure. And they can still be very productive members of society. I mean, there's a lot.
Oh, absolutely.
Positive.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean just an ACT score, but there's a lot of complexity in that space.
Well,
but sorry, yes, Andrew, we're not immune.
What?
We are not immune.
Oh, my bad.
Okay, I'm gonna close up rooms.
Okay.
Donna, I just put PBL for our inquiry project. Justin, where are you? I missed that. Where are you right now?
Spring Hill Suites.
Spring Hill Suites. Is that off of Hurstbourne?
Yeah, it's by the airport. I don't know what that
Oh,
is.
by the airport. Oh, yeah, okay.
In that little group of hotels, Crown Plaza,
Yep.
there by the Kentucky Expo Fair thing, whatever that is.
He's going to get to hear every airplane that comes in or out from UPS all night long.
I was super worried about that, but the hotel clearly has accommodated for that, because I haven't heard a single one.
And you can see U of L from here, so from where you are, so you can
Should
see.
we go, Andrew? We are recording right now, which I'm sure is a bad idea. What is the best U of L bar in town tonight? And I feel like I'll wear my UK stuff, and we'll just have a fun night on the town.
Oh man, the best bar UK or U of L bar. I mean, you can't go wrong going anywhere on Bardstown Road. Especially right now, I would definitely go to either one of the. There's 3 Irish places right off of Baxter Ave that you could go to.
Now I do have Next Gen tomorrow, so I have to survive whatever
That's
happens.
true. That is true. I would say, honestly, I love Hopcat. Hopcat is. I
we
would.
have one in Lexington.
Okay, yeah, and it's got all. I mean, as many beers as you could imagine, and a lot of people go there. So.
All right.
A lot of U of L people.
What was the big controversy? I'm just sort of.
Rick, what the heck?
What?
I don't know.
Hey, I've been in Columbus, Indiana today. Okay.
Yeah, at the New Tech. Awesome. Yeah, so U of L was paying players to come there, is what it seems like. I don't think that's proven.
That's obvious. That's been known. So now it's been proven. So what?
Except that the FBI is involved, and they have arrested 4 coaches at other schools. They have named, actually they have named Louisville now. Louisville has confirmed that they're the other school. And the thinking is that the people involved at Louisville turned evidence against the other schools, or that their involvement with the money was a little bit different. But in any event,
They were more ethical in their unethicality. Okay.
They were only moving around $100,000. Whereas
They sit on the local.
I'm clueless.
The best quote.
Our local news said that
This is EDL 662.
Adidas is the one.
My bad.
Adidas is the one supplying them. I was just going to say that our local news says Adidas is at the very bottom. They're the ones supplying the money to these people.
Yeah.
So, see, U of L just signed a big contract with Adidas. Patino was on the news, and it was a big deal. Okay? And now we know why.
Well, I think the best quote of the night was in the transcript. If you read it, you know, first off, we're University 6, but the best quote was one of the recruiters or whoever it was said, "Oh, hey, we got to be very careful with this. We're currently on probation." And it's like, come on now.
Yeah. That's the worst. The worst part for me is that this is recent after the latest scandals. And so they didn't learn their lesson from those scandals, and they kept going for it. That is pretty unforgivable.
I think Patino and Jurek will be gone.
Yeah,
easily.
I do too. Louisville's going to be lucky to have a basketball program next year right now. Like, if they actually play basketball next year, I would consider that a victory for U of L right now. So, anyway, okay. I know. It's hard. It's hard. It's happening in real time. And we're here. So, now let's take a look at these real fast and just get a quick overview. Now, what I love about this is where the real rubber starts to meet the road. We start to align all of the pieces that we've started to put in place so far into a system of assessments and inquiry projects that can tell us at the portfolio stage whether or not we've actually mastered the things we wanted to master at the beginning with our graduate profile skills, right? So here's the pieces starting to come together. So let's see how a couple pieces came together. So Amy and Norman were working on sort of elementary level stuff. Amy did a great job with the icons, if you want to look at the first link there. And so real quickly, Amy, in 20 seconds or so, give us a sense of how the pieces are coming together for you.
Okay, yeah, so I just basically took our graduate profile and identified some of those big skills. So we had communication, and our end result would be that presentation type skill. We use the rubric from the Buck Institute for that. So we do have something in place for that. The critical thinking was my next picture, and just really trying to help analyze, whatever it is, the material that they're doing. That's still a little vague in terms of like how to measure that exactly, the analysis. I mean, you can do like student thinking. Collaboration, one component we measure that through is our critical friends that we use. We use a critical friends protocol, so that's one thing that we have done. And then also creative thinking is just through this notion of inventing or creating something. So it's just like design thinking. We've done that as well. So those are just a few big picture things.
Perfect.
Very
you
big.
can see this would be some great work in your PLCs or your professional, whatever your sort of meeting with your teachers are. Like what a great concept for the 4th grade team or the 5th grade team to sort of try to digest. And then like what we talked about last time, having a continuum so that the performance assessments that happen in 5th grade are building on things that happen in 4th grade, that kind of stuff. Makes sense. Okay, awesome. Onward to our next group, group 2, that we're looking sort of in more of the high school space with Anna, Andrew, and Donna. So give us a sense of that one, guys, real quick. Take it away, Andrew.
Okay.
Or no, Donna's jumping in.
No, there you go. Sorry. I was trying to put I was trying to be cool and put the nouns in there. but I didn't get time.
Well, we talked about communication, collaboration, self-efficacy and persistence, and inquiry and critical thinking. And the one thing that we came up with was project-based learning as the inquiry project. But for communication, there would be a presentation of a final product. It doesn't have to be specified at this point in time. Collaboration, the assessment of individual contributions at milestone points using rubrics on the artifacts. The self-efficacy and persistence, we talked about critical feedback. And then inquiry and critical thinking, we talked about cognitive skills on a research problem.
Okay.
And sort of like your science expo, not a science fair, but a problem that students could work on over time and refine with.
Yeah, that's nice. I like how those pieces are starting to come together. I can see a holistic picture starting to develop there about a kid. And again, that's great. And I think that this is a great thing to be doing at that high school graduation standpoint. I mean, I love the concept of a defense before graduation. Okay, onward into higher ed. Now we go into group 3, which was Carrie's group, thinking about this within the world of physical therapy. Carrie and Jonathan.
Yeah, so we are profile skills for, this is the PT program, critical thinking, decision making, evidence-informed practice, communication, and professional practice. So right now the students, they go out on internship at the end of their curriculum, and they have to pick a patient case and a patient and do a case report on that patient. So the idea is they have to go in, research the most appropriate evidence-based interventions for that patient, and then they write up a case report, and it's modeled after like case reports that they would submit to a PT journal, for example. And right now that's all they do. They write it up, and then when they come back, they submit it for a grade. But we also have a research day that is optional for them to participate in, and I would like to make it mandatory so that they write up their case report. They have to make a poster and get it printed out and present at the research day. And then the assessments, right now we really just have a grading rubric. We're looking at whether the interventions they chose were correct, were appropriate, and looking at the research, are they connecting the dots between the research and the clinic, and how clearly they write and how they can defend their case.
Okay, good. So I think a little bit more development still around those critical assessments. It sounds like, as you're thinking about, so you definitely have some clarity around what are the tasks that emerge there that currently live in the program. And so those tasks, I think, live somewhere between the inquiry right now and the assessment. And so sort of taking what you know to be a really great task, like the internship, and then layering in both directions, right? So what is the core driving question to the internship, and what is that really clean, clear final product that we can all sort of have some shared sense of what this student knows and can do at the end. So I think just for you, since you already have tasks, and I think Will is in the same boat a little bit, there's some clear tasks already in the program, stretching those out a little bit into clarity on the front end and clarity on the back end. So, okay, interesting. Onward then to Rick and Will, who they have a lot here. So Will, give us as quick of a sense of it as you can.
So first of all, mine is very specific. I think everybody else kind of conceptualized a little bit better. Mine are very specific to the actual program. But so describing how communities and individuals interact with information systems, analyzing major tenets of information practice, connecting diverse communities with appropriate information resources, and explaining the dependence of information retrieval on the organization of information. And so we have performance assessments in place for those, which include a project paper assessing community needs, a theory-based research project requiring students to examine theory and application of theory, a community needs assessment focused on a minority or disadvantaged group, and metadata projects, which force students to focus on the organization of information and understand how that impacts the retrieval of information.
Okay, good. A lot of clarity starting to emerge there. You already, again, have a bunch of pretty clear tasks. And those, I think, are some solid assessment pieces in place. The piece I'll be interested to see how it comes together is what is the inquiry, or is there one linked to these pieces, which that will be what's next for us. So we'll be able to sort of have a better sense of that. Some of them are really clear to me around like the theory-based research project, if that research project is sort of an authentic research project and not just sort of for show kind of thing. Or the community needs assessment, again, makes complete sense. How authentic is that community needs assessment? So anyway, we'll get to that next. So thanks. Hopefully you see how we start to align the pieces here. And now these big pieces feed into a portfolio. The portfolio is something that is easily defended. That portfolio also is a great archive of evidence. And so how we judge the overall school effectiveness, we now have evidence of, so that outside examiners, which we already clearly do in higher ed when we have audits of higher ed programs for accreditation purposes, those auditors have the evidence to look at, especially when that's a digital portfolio. These are digital artifacts feeding into a defense that we can somehow digitally capture, right? Like, boom, here is everything that happened with this student. We've got it from start to finish. These are all the artifacts. There's nothing else you should need here. Give me my accreditation, right? That's a beautiful picture. And in higher ed spaces, as Carrie was doing hers, you know, Carrie, I could really see that living on your website, right? Like, how clear is that to students on the front end of, these are the major things we think we're going to teach you, these are the big projects that you're going to do, and these are the big papers and assessments that you need to write. Super clear, right up front. Like, this is what you got to do. Love it. I put mine, the one I was working on the back on the agenda. So the task when I was doing this with Justin Wells that day that we were working together a couple of months ago. So as I was thinking about it, so I sort of pulled it out this way. We have our 5 big skills at STEAM, and we then link that into projects. Most of those projects already exist for us. You can see that I put little circles to say this is a senior year project, this is a sophomore year project, whatever. And then what Justin was really pushing us for that I didn't get into tonight was, and we should, is what are the reflection pieces that go with each project, right? So that's another really big piece that we haven't really fully talked about yet, but John Dewey would slap our hands because we haven't, right? And because for him, the learning only really happens at reflection, right? So that's a big piece that Justin was trying to push that we haven't quite got to for us yet. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, isn't that just part of the portfolio process though? Because in your presentation?
Yeah, yes. Okay. It depends on how that shapes up, right? But certainly for us in our programs that Amy's going to have to deal with soon in the principal program, there is a reflective, a new document. You put the artifacts in our portfolio, but then you also have to write a reflective piece on each artifact. And each professor then on the panel judges independently which of those is more important. Ideally, both are. But for me, the actual artifacts are super important. For Tricia and for others in our department, the reflection is the vastly more important part. So yeah, those all come together nicely. Now, break time, but can you, during your break at some point, we'll take a nice 10-minute break here, come back at 7:10, put your best learning experience in one of those columns next on the chart. Okay, so we're going to get now into the learning experiences. We're going to start having more fun. So let's start with the best learning experience that you personally can remember. Put that in the chart. Take a break. See you at 7:10.
And for people who finish up early, I have a link to the latest post from Kentucky Sports Radio on Twitter. Patino's lawyers are issuing statements. The university is not.
Well, I heard on WDRB that tomorrow morning, we're supposed to find out some big news.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means, but I could guess what that means.
Yeah. Yes. It's time. It's
Tino
time.
is part of the mafia. That's what we're going to find out.
All right. Take a break. Enjoy. See you back in 10 minutes. Interesting.
So Donna, are you prepared to read the dissertations?
I am reading. Now, the problem I have is that I don't have a rubric really. So, you know, I took some things out of Glathorn, and that's what I'm using as my touchstone. But I may be looking for a rubric. I mean, it's hard for me to not have a rubric.
Yeah. I figure the first one will be extremely difficult, and then after that, we'll have a clue what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not that hard. Dissertations are not that complex of documents. I mean, there's a lot of mystique around them, but they're not as complex as you might imagine. They're actually super logical. If they're done well, they're extremely logical in their flow and pattern, right? And so you're getting the entire picture as it unfolds. So, yeah. I mean, it's just hard because it's a lot of pages to read and it's very academic.
Well, you know, our buddy Tim Tanner told us the other day that his great takeaway in reading the 5 dissertations that we have to read in 792 was that we could write a dissertation. You know, that it is not above our level to do, that we could actually do that. So yeah. Hopefully he was right.
I'm sure. All right. The fun stuff. 2 teaching and learning changes. So let's enjoy it. Now, how many of you have watched Most Likely to Succeed? Anyone watched it? Rick, I'm sure. Have you watched it in the past? Yes. Oh, and Amy, also good. Okay, great. Now, we're not going to pull a lot from it, but I'm going to pull a few things. They have this great thing called Most Likely to Succeed Sparks. Let's see. I'll put it over in the chat right now. Will I? No, I will not. Sorry, my other window closed on me. That's why you run 2, because sometimes computers go down. So here it is, Sparks. Now, I love these Sparks. I love these little snippets, mltsfilm.org. And so tonight, I want to just kick us off with the WHEEL project. So we're going to start to talk a lot about project-based learning. And project-based learning and inquiry are deeply connected. And as you we're moving now into the next chapter of the Transforming Schools book into, okay, so what changes in teaching and learning? Now that we have a sense of the outcomes that we want and a way to monitor, assess, and report those outcomes, what changes with teaching and learning? Okay, so there we go. Now we're into it. This movie eliminated about half the professional development that I do. Anyone that's seen the movie is like, okay, I get what needs to happen. Great. So it's definitely a great watch. The director, Ted Dintersmith, or the guy that funded the whole thing, he's a venture capital dude who's trying to make a big splash in education. Is a big fan of ours in Kentucky, and we have been told that we're the first chapter in the new book that he just sent to the publishers, and so that should be coming out in the next. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. How long does a book take once it gets to the publisher? Maybe 6 months? I don't know. So, yeah, Rick, are you raising your hand? No? Okay, good. I wasn't sure. Okay, so give a quick look at the WHEEL project. It's 3 minutes, and I'll see you back here in 3 minutes at 7:17. All right, good. Thumbs up. All right, great. So this is the classic high-tech high-wheel project, which lives, in lore these days. There's many projects, and we're going to take a look at a bunch more. But this particular one captures a lot of what is interesting and unique about project-based learning that I think is easy to grasp. And it's also super visually appealing and interesting, and I think makes the learning super visible. So that I think there's a lot of good stuff going on with this particular project, but it's just one project amongst many. So this would have been the kids at High Tech High during this semester would have been taking 4 total classes. Those classes would have been grouped into groups of 2. This was a grouping of 2 classes working together, sort of a social studies component, looking at the ancient civilizations, the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, and an engineering component. So those 2 content areas are working together to produce this visual way of representing and showing their learning. But you could see along the way there were checkpoints. That girl at one point had that worksheet that was describing her theories. And so, okay, great. Here's a big package of learning. You could take this up into higher ed. You could pull this back down into elementary. That is all easily, as we start to think about, okay, how do we start to build projects in doing into our work so that the kids have really good things to exhibit at their performances, in their performance assessment, and that go into their portfolios, right? There's a key piece in this is the kids have to have great things to show. And to have great things to show, we have to give them great opportunities to learn. And that is back on us as the educators in all of our various contexts to create opportunities for great learning experiences. So components of that show up, I think, in all of the experiences you all listed in your best learning experiences of your life. And that took a lot of different forms. Some of them clearly sort of were more of a project-based assignment. So Amy's research on historical events, working in groups, digging into cause and effect, that strikes me. There's a good driving question there, clearly. And so that strikes me as pretty performance-based, project-based, sorry. Clearly there was some kind of project going on for Rick when he almost burned the school down or whatever happened there. At least it was a chemistry experiment. So that, of course, was a great learning experience because it became super authentic. Even if it wasn't super authentic at the beginning, it certainly became highly authentic once you realize, like, boy, this is what can happen. Then beyond that, there's other things that are pulling out. So relationships showed up big on some of the best learning experiences of your life. For Norman, relationships mattered huge. And what was critical about the relationship was then the teacher, because she knew Norman, was capable of personalizing and individualizing down to Norman's particular needs. So that has a lot of the key elements there. And the same for Donna, having a little bit of choice at that time. I mean, hey, it's something. You know, I can imagine. Did you go to Catholic schools, Donna? Taught by nuns? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably not really big on project-based learning.
Well, you know, I know in 2017, having a choice doesn't sound like much, but this was 1963. So you're talking about a long time ago.
Yeah. Definitely a different historical moment for us as we read through that chapter 1, as we think about the historical ebbs and flows of education. So we were definitely in the Cold War response phase in that period. Anyway, okay, Andrews, very much, that definitely strikes me as a very project-based activity that you were working on there. So inevitably, every time we ask this, on all the next gens that we do, the classes that we work on, what was the best learning experience? And we almost always start with that question, because when people start to articulate what were those best learning experiences, inevitably elements of project-based learning start to emerge. For me personally, I could put mine in there. Mine was my Eagle Scout project. It wasn't even related to school. The Eagle Scout project was to save a clock in my hometown, basically, and it was an old tower clock that rang a bell and had a clock face up in the air, all that kind of stuff. anyway, so as my uncle was driving me around, so I guess I was 14 or 15-year-old kid tasked with saving this clock in this community. Great driving question, great sort of highly authentic, really community engaged. And so, had to fundraise, tons of stuff going on there. But it was a great learning experience, no doubt about it, but it met almost all the criteria of a great project-based learning. Inevitably, that is what we have. Now, Will, I'm not sure about yours, the allegory of the cave. However, at least it struck me as taking something that could be highly inauthentic and made it authentic to you at a given moment in time.
I would say that that's correct. There was, outside of a writing assignment here or there, we didn't do project-based learning when I was in college.
Yeah, I know. And to Rick's point, we still don't.
And, I think I certainly appreciate the authenticity of project-based learning, but it is still possible to learn in the old antiquated system. And some teachers in some moments really were impactful.
1,000,000%. Yeah. I don't, right. This is a class on deeper learning, not on the absence of learning happening in more traditional models. Certainly learning is happening there, and it's happening for some percentage of the kids. Walk into a given traditional classroom at Norman School, and Norman, in a given classroom, how many kids are engaged in actively learning at a given moment in a classroom in your school? Turn your audio on.
It really depends on what we're studying at the time. If it's direct instruction, where I'm up giving direct instruction, maybe half.
Okay.
I would say.
That's not bad. That's not bad, Norman. You're okay about that?
It kind of varies. If we're doing group activities, like collaborative type stuff, most all are. But we're talking middle schoolers, so the way they operate is in a group activity. They'll work a while, socialize a little while, and work back and forth. But it gets done. So.
All right, awesome. Now I want to compare that to Rick. You were at a sort of project-based school today. What did you see when you were out in that school today? What was the level of engagement? Because you just showed up on a random day, right? The kids didn't really think this was a special day. This was just a normal day for the kids.
Yeah, they introduced the whole day. They've had in a year 3,000 people come by their schools, so visitors are very common there. So the kids just did their work. You asked, well, what was the common thread? The kids were amazingly engaged, no discipline issues, a lot of focus. Now, were they putting on a dog and pony show? I did my own touring because it was a little bit, I wanted to really see. I went into a lot of classrooms apart from the tour group. It was just amazing. They were engaged, authentic.
Yeah, and it might not be 100%. And I think it's this ultra rare day when we even get above 95% at STEAM. But we are definitely functioning in more of the 70-80% engagement range on a given day than we're down in the 40-50% range on a given day.
Well, I visited STEAM with you, and I was just enthralled again with the level the kids were involved, their engagement. It was their school, and it was their learning. That was the cool thing about it.
Yeah, they've taken a lot more ownership. And there's a lot culturally that goes along with that. But at the core of what we are trying to do, live these concepts in project-based learning. So looking at the agenda, you see that big circle concept with the essential project design elements. These 8 elements, I think there's 7 elements. The Buck Institute has changed over time. These are the core elements of what makes a gold standard PBL in their eyes. The reason that I'm talking about PBL right now and not straight up inquiry is that I love PBL as a method to achieve in a given context, great inquiry learning. Now, I think you can examine inquiry learning more broadly. I think there are inquiries that are extremely valuable that are not PBLs. So a great research project, for instance, in higher ed, might not be a PBL, but it might be a great inquiry. Your dissertation's maybe not a PBL, hopefully a great inquiry. So certainly there's inquiry that lives outside of this, but I love this framework for helping us sort of digest what are the pieces, what are the core components that need to be existing in the teaching and learning experience for us to get a lot closer to that pre-World War I where John Dewey thought we should be, right? What are those pieces? So that gets us to this big circle in the middle. These are the pieces of a great PBL. We don't achieve these at STEAM on a given day, but this is what we're going for. This is our big target. A challenging problem or question. A sustained inquiry to answer that driving question. Authenticity in the project. There needs to be something super authentic about what's happening. There needs to be some student voice and choice happening throughout. They need to have a say in something, but not all of it, right? A lot of times this gets mistaken for kids are making all the decisions. Not the case. As you saw with the wheel project, the kids were boxed in. You have voice and choice on what you're going to do inside of your component of the wheel, but that you're going to do this thing with this kind of laser cutting relative to this kind of historical statement that you're going to make. They have voice and choice inside of a teacher pre-designed box. Preacher might have been a Freudian slip there. All right, reflection. Of course, that piece has to go with it because there's Dewey coming back saying, look, the learning doesn't happen until reflection. So you got to have that piece. Critique and revision. There's got to be sort of a series of steps, right? A lot of learning happens from critique, revision, reflection, critique, revision, reflection, there's a lot of great learning happening there. And then to just triple down on the authenticity, a public product. You've got to show your work publicly. And put all those pieces together, you have a great PBL. So what kind of forms can this take? Well, there's a link down there below the wheel project, which says High Tech High unboxed cards. Right now it's living at the very top of that next page. I love High Tech High for a variety of reasons, but one of the things I love most deeply is that they also show their work by publishing all of their projects online. And so you can go see for the past 10 years of projects that have emerged at High Tech High. And you can click on any one of those and it takes you into what happened with the project, a couple of pictures, a teacher reflection, a student reflection, and a link to go learn more if you want to, right? And so how does this work in social studies context? How does this work in a math context? Okay, here's examples after examples after examples. And this is not the only database of great PBLs out there. There are multiple databases of great project-based learning activities. And so a lot of the task for teachers is not to just create something whole cloth new from scratch. It is adapting a lot of great learning activities that already exist. And teachers are good at that. Teachers are really good at taking something that was tried, they did it in California, but we're going to do it this way because it fits our context better, and we're going to investigate this latest thing that's happening here in Louisville or whatever. Okay. So there's tons and tons of examples of great PBLs that can unfold. So there's another link there to the essential elements of the PBL. One of the key things, we're getting back into our chapter now. This aligns deeply with that chapter 3, I guess, of Transforming Schools. I have the book here somewhere. I don't know what chapter we're on right now. I am sorry, but this is all aligning closely because they're also talking about at the same time, so how does the standards fit in? You're bringing those in. And a great PBL brings in multiple standards, probably across multiple disciplines, right? So you're able to check multiple boxes. Now, that in the higher ed context works extremely well in the undergraduate space, especially in the undergraduate space for us at UK, we have a a core, I guess it's not called the Common Core. What's it called? I'm forgetting what we call the core. The Kentucky Core? I don't remember what we call it.
Core?
Kentucky academic standards now. They took the core out.
Oh, yeah. So there you go. We've eliminated the core, but kept the core of the core.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They
Anyway.
don't want to call it that.
Right.
I
But
don't know.
Will knows what I'm talking about. At UK, we have a common experience some way, but we have standards that live across multiple disciplines. Not even really standards, but things that we want kids to achieve across multiple disciplines. But one project could easily hit multiple standards, even for us in higher ed. At the undergrad level, by the time you get to carry spaces in these professional spaces, maybe we're not as cross-disciplinary as we are anymore, because now we're really pushing on. If you PhD students have seen that image where what is a doctorate? A doctorate is just pushing out the circle of knowledge ever so slightly in one little bitty spot. So by the time you're getting really, really narrow, maybe we're forgetting the cross-disciplinary stuff, although certainly there's some great thinking about why are we so narrow, right? Like why don't our doctorates have a variety of skills? But anyway, neither here nor there. So I'm going to just do a real quick assignment with you guys, and want you to start to mess with a driving question. So I might even put you back out into the same groups, but this time work with the other person and see if we can't craft a great driving question. And then you can see I put another box over there, the estimated time to completion. Like how long would it take to answer this great driving question? And this driving question is the first thing that's going to lead us on a project, right? So we're going to need to do a project to answer this question. And how long would it take to answer that question? And in your own authentic spaces too, right? So this time Amy and Norman work together. Norman leads a little bit more something sort of an authentic project that would make sense for your kiddos. And Amy's going to give some feedback this time around, okay? Flip the script on this, see if we can't create some interesting driving questions. Let's just start to practice this a little bit. Open all rooms, go. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So variations going on here, multiple questions perhaps.
But I think it's always best if you can put it authentically back to them. So like it defines, like they own the problem, they own the question a little bit too. And then it doesn't feel like it's just a task, but it feels like it's really
It's theirs.
It's theirs, that they own it.
Right.
So, and that's something pretty, that may be something smaller, but it depends, like on an estimated time of completion. What were you thinking? A couple, did you say?
I would say maybe 3 to 4 weeks probably, if you built in all the other stuff, the little benchmarks and that.
Yeah, and I would say that's been our biggest learning curve. Really, is how to benchmark adequately, because it's very hard if a project becomes too large. If a project is really big, like for instance, how do we partner with our community members to solve a particular issue? It's almost like that becomes undoable a little bit. So, and at an elementary level, now maybe not so much at a middle or a high school level, but it's harder to manage something that large, I guess.
Right. Well, it's hard for us too. So
yeah.
Very.
I always feel weird, you guys watching the recording and seeing us in these weird spaces. All right, welcome back. Let's see, go back. There we go. All right, hi, good evening. Listening in on class, taking some notes about how you would like your elementary experience to be. Carrie, one of the things that works really well at elementary school, if you're on the local PTA or anything, is passion projects for kiddos. Do you get to do any passion projects?
Well, she's in kindergarten, so she just started.
Just getting started.
Yeah.
Do you like kindergarten so far? Yeah. Is your teacher really nice to you? And you have 2 teachers? Wow, very nice. And have you learned something really new and interesting lately? Can you think of anything really new and interesting that you learned?
Tell them what you did today. What did you do today with your vegetables?
We shared vegetables.
Yeah. And then did you eat them?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Nice.
They had to put it in a brown bag and give 3 clues for their vegetables.
That's lovely. And did people that usually don't like to eat vegetables, did they eat the vegetables too? They did. Amazing.
Mommy, I tried a cherry tomato.
You tried a cherry tomato? See, she doesn't like tomatoes. It worked.
Good stuff. Yeah. All right. So this is a bit of a challenge around creating a driving question. And I watched you all sort of do revisions. Like there was one question that sort of formed, and then we're going to go back and erase a little bit, and we're forming up a new question. Interesting. And so this is really a technique and a skill that teachers develop over time, which is forming great driving questions. And this is something with practice you will get better at. But here at the beginning, if you're new to project-based learning, creating a good driving question can be sort of a hard thing to do. So Rick and Will, so now we're back into Rick's spaces. You guys crafted a great driving question around transforming learning culture.
Yeah, I sort of came from an administrative point of view. I told Will I'm sort of removed from education and the classroom application. I thought, well, I look at school transformation, and that's why Will let me create that question. He was so good, broad latitude.
Sounds good. And so for you, it is a big question, and it shapes up as a multi-year question, which in dissertation spaces is a great thing is a great kind of timeline to be working on. But certainly would scare the heck out of me if we were going to try that sort of in a P12 world. All right, so Amy and
I can
Norman
attest
then
to that.
around seventh graders. So you all sort of made it super personal, which I love. A lot of authenticity coming across right away in this question. Give us a sense of it.
Well, in seventh grade, language arts, writing convincing arguments is a big push in the Common Core, evidence-based, research-based. So we come up with the question, how can we as seventh graders convince our principal to add more technology in the classroom with evidence? So, I mean, we're figuring 3 to 4 weeks. It's got a lot of benchmarks we could build in there. That's how we were.
Want to do some research? We might want to look at some examples. We might want to do some budget research to determine how much is each of these things going to cost. So you can start to feel the standards starting to flow into this question, right? So great. So we're going to check a lot of boxes here. Can really feel the authenticity in the question, because they're not asking the question about how do seventh graders globally do this. They're saying, how do we in our life fix this problem? Highly authentic. So that really strikes me as a great thing. And it also does set a tone. And you remember from the chapter, great driving questions help to set a tone. And I feel the tone coming across there of, this is something we're all going to do together. We're all going to chip in. And what if all of us work together? Could we actually make this small change in the world? There's an actual change in the world implied in the question. And I think that is a good tone. All right, great. So Carrie and Jonathan, back into higher ed. And now on Jonathan's side of the equation, what did you come up with? Help us understand it.
So how can we best, and I put that in quotes because it's subjective, develop a piece of property using the perspective of a developer's interest in financial gain, a community's interest in keeping the community nice, we'll put it that way, and environmental concerns. So this is a development project that could be hashed out over a semester-long project. Typically in the professional world, that would take about probably 6 weeks to get pretty well developed, but it would provide the students with the opportunity to do some research into planning and zoning regulations in the community of choice. They'll have to look into costs associated with the development process and return on investment and what they could market land for. The best use for the community. Is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it going to be multifamily residential? So they have to look into quite a few concerns in order to develop their professional knowledge on that subject.
I like it. And when you say this property, you're meaning a specific piece of property that you're going to identify.
This is actually a project that I've used, and it would actually be a landform, so they would know the formation of the ground, and they would have to work with that ground in order to actually develop roadways. There's a lot of design process that goes into getting a roadway drivable. So yeah, it's a huge project.
Yeah, I like it. But I would also like to have checkpoints along the way. You know, it's a mega project, right? And so when you do the zoning stuff, right, maybe that's a checkpoint, which is sort of report the zoning requirements, or, you know, so I could see checkpoints flowing out along this, sort of smaller projects within one mega project.
Absolutely.
So, okay, awesome. And the last one, Andrew and Donna. So do we turn sort of to Donna's side, although it seems like something that would still interest Andrew?
Can't lie to you. This is actually one I did last year at DOS. So.
Okay, Donna, you can't let him get by with that kind of stuff.
You know.
I told Donna that. We as a school, the Buck Institute, like we got sent and we did, like as a school, we had to do 2 PBLs last year. And so, like you said, over the summer we spent 2 days just working on driving questions, and then we spent another 2 days working on the next step, and we just went through like each step. So this is actually one I did last year. Sorry.
Well, that's fine, but still, it's a good example of a driving question, and certainly one that a lot of thought has been put into. And you can sort of see that playing just based off of that question. You can sort of mentally see unfolding a series of events. And did you like put the kids in groups on this one, or was this a more individual thing?
This was groups. In groups of 3, and essentially all they were given was areas in Louisville that had environmental concerns, and they could pick an area, and then essentially, like, you know, what you want to do with the PBL is you want to weave it into your instruction to where it's like you don't want to teach and then have the kids work on the project, it's weaving it. And so as they were learning about like each of these, the environment, like in terms of chemistry, they were working on this, and their final product was essentially a proposal or a physical, like something that they designed that could help, like they could design a mini model of something that could help an area of Louisville. So for example, the Ohio River, how bad the Ohio River is. Some kids built like these amazing like mini model water filter thing. Basically, you could put in parts of the Ohio River to help clean it up, essentially. So it was actually pretty cool. And so then we brought in, there's like 3 different environmental companies in Louisville that we asked to come in, and we did in the gym. And so we had them come in, and we also had like anyone from DOS or parents come in, and essentially they presented in a scientific fair kind of model. So they essentially had a booth, and people would walk around, and then they would like present multiple times throughout the day as people would come by. So it was cool.
Okay, good. All right, great driving questions that you guys are starting to form up. And with practice, Andrew had 2 days of training on just this element of forming great driving questions. With practice, the driving questions get better and better and better. For our teachers now at STEAM, especially our more experienced ones, they can tell like 2 sentences into a project tuning exercise when we're working to really craft these projects, if the teacher's on the right track with a great driving question or not. It's super apparent as you've practiced it more and more. And the flaws in the question become pretty immediately obvious. Now, all of this, doc students, should be ringing a bell for you. Why do you think I feel like it should ring a bell for you?
Because that's our dissertation. It's our driving question.
Yes.
Good.
It's the same, that same concept, that same inquiry concept is living in your dissertation, which is you all are framing up a great driving question that you are then going to conduct an inquiry on over the course of however much time, approved by the university, signed off on by a committee, all that kind of stuff, right? That should be able to answer a great driving question. Our expectations for answering that question, though, at the dissertation level are really high. Like, we actually need you to answer the question, whereas maybe in 7th grade for Norman, right? Like they tackle this question and they get to some great learning outcomes, but they didn't get a great answer to the question. Okay, we live with that, right? We live with that in 7th grade, but as students move further and further up this sort of higher learning continuum, we expect better and better answers to these great driving questions, to the point where you guys are like, you better have some good answers in those dissertations. Even if the answer is no result, okay, scientifically, I want you to show us how no result was the right answer here. So, okay, but that's why it should be ringing a bell for you. Inquiry is living at the core of both of these activities. And so because inquiry is living at the core of these things, we're seeing a lot of the same practices emerging on both of them. All right, great. And now we sort of move down the list. The sustained inquiry. The breadth versus depth question is a hard one for public schools. They've really struggled with this over time. For master's degrees, for doctorate degrees, not a hard question. We go for depth over breadth for the most part. But for the most part, you have high school classes that go for breadth over depth. And inquiry in PBL ask us to go for depth. There's a lot there. There's a lot to digest there. But that is an essential trade-off that lives at the heart of this work, that you can't cover as much. If we had time, we would watch The Spark. We don't have time tonight, but you can watch it on your own. It talks about AP US history which covers all of American history in the course of a year. And so you can spend a grand total of like 2 or 3 days on the Civil War.
Yeah.
Right? There's no depth there. And so when really complex questions emerge about the Civil War in society, about like whether a Confederate general should be sitting on our courthouse lawn in Lexington, that is a really complex question, which our high school graduates have a grand total of like 3 or 4 days on the Civil War. How are they going to help answer this really complex question in society? But, right, you still have to make a trade-off. Maybe you cover, AP US history covers the War of 1812 in 1 day, maybe half a day. Going for depth might wind up in us not covering that at all. There's some trade-offs there that I think have to be worked through as you think about what are and in higher ed too, as you think about if you embed more internship into your work, like Carrie's been doing in physical therapy, that leaves less time for us to try to cover more and more content. There's breadth versus depth questions. Yep, Rick.
Real quick question. Is the AP going to be changing? Have you heard that I've heard different components in the next couple of years, the transition is going to incorporate more project-based learning. Have you heard that?
Just rumors, but I do think AP understands they have a bit of a problem. Whereas IB, for instance, IB has always been much more tightly aligned to this than AP is. AP was about breadth instead of depth, right? They're about trying to give you as many answers to multiple choice questions as possible that might emerge for you in various exams. Now, there's still decent learning happening there. I don't want to dismiss everything that's happening in AP, but certainly there was a choice inherent in AP to go for breadth.
Yeah.
I think they are questioning that choice, but whether anything will change, I don't know, because there's a whole lot of money and power tied up around AP. And if you start messing with that, I don't know what will happen.
Well, the new computer science AP test is performance-based.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So in that particular space, and maybe that was a good pilot for them to sort of have kids actually do something as a result of a class rather than try to memorize as much as possible and take a test.
Right.
Okay, well, hey, Rick, potentially good news for me. It's happening. You got to have some patience. I've had to learn patience in this job, that you see good things happen, but what you want to happen quickly, like higher ed to get it or AP to change, that's a 5 to 10 year project, unfortunately. So authenticity is our next big part. Again, there's a great Spark there if you want to go check it out. The Deeper Learning chapter 3 in the Transforming Schools book does a really good job around this, around reaching beyond the school walls, bringing in partners. Oh, there's so much goodness here. It's hard. I'm actually so frustrated all the time that we can't make things more authentic. It frustrates me. One of the big struggles I've maybe even said in this class already is around social studies for me. Basically all of social studies should be taught for me in this massively authentic way. And we just had this thing we did one of our teachers, there's so much here. I got to slow down, slow mentally down. One of our teachers did a great PBL the other day around civil rights. And so, why would you ever teach civil rights from a textbook? That is insanity to me when so many people living around us experienced this entire period. We should just go talk to them. So we did that the other day, and it turned into a great learning experience for our kids, wound up in the Herald Leader. But what was frustrating is English teacher led that project. Right now, we made some changes, as Rick is fully aware. We sort of stole one of Rick's teachers this year in social studies to try to bring our social studies curriculum up to speed. But basically, the entire social studies curriculum should be in the community. I mean, you should just teach in the community. But I want a level of authenticity that, maybe is not possible not rationally, reasonably possible for our schools. But there's a lot there. And the more authentic, the more connected, the more real we can make things, obviously, the more engaged learners become. I mean, that seems like that we shouldn't have to remind ourselves of that, but I feel like we do.
Tell Coleman I said hello.
Yeah, Coleman's doing great work already. He tried to tackle some crazy Civil War. He tried to tackle this project around the statues on the courthouse lawn, but you know me, I'm going to give them professional choice. It's their call to make. So I was ready to go down the rabbit hole with Coleman and wind up having to defend this in the paper. But at the last minute, Coleman decided, hey, maybe we shouldn't tackle the most controversial issue in Lexington right now. And
timing is everything.
Yeah.
You know, it was his 8th grade class last year at Lexington Christian that we got the design of the Lexington flag adopted. Mm-hmm. And it was his class that did that. We had the mayor come in. Yeah, he's brilliant. I'm glad you got him.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, but thanks. And I know it's not really your thing anymore, but still I always feel bad when we take teachers from good schools.
He needed to expand, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. All right. So the more authenticity, the better. Student voice and choice, reflection, critique, revision, public product, those are our pieces around project-based learning. It's all here in the Transforming Schools book, and so you can pull out the pieces of that. But those are sort of the core concepts that want to live with us over the course of the next week or two, or the next couple of meetings, as we sort of more fully explore that classroom experience for a kiddo. We're going to continue to explore that for a couple more classes. We're going to explore variations of that. We're going to bring the internships in, not for next week's reading, but the week after that, we're going to bring internships in. After that, we're going to tackle an equity question, and then we're going to start to go back up into the big picture, district level, system decisions, and where does tech live in all of that. So those are the steps ahead of us in our journey. I know, and I need Donna to step up and help hold me a little bit accountable for getting more info to you guys about blog projects that you need to be working on. And so can you just remind me of that? And like Thursday is a good day to remind me of that, to get you all that info. I'm good at listening to Donna. Donna knows how to deal with me, and I love people that know how to deal with me. Honestly, I'm trying to hire one right now that can just tell me what to do. I just like people just tell me what to do, because it's so much going on. So readings for next time, though. This book, we're continuing to sort of go somewhat chronologically through this book. And so we'll just sort of move forward now into school culture. Although I'll say that for the most part, this is not the most important book for next week's reading. So if anything, you might want to sort of refresh on chapter 3, because we're really going to stay with chapter 3 for a little bit in this book. But on the
Justin, are you talking about Transforming Schools?
Yeah, this one,
okay.
The Transforming Schools book. We are going to sort of hang out in chapter 3. Elements of chapter 4 around school culture will start to come in, because as you start to do more and more of this type of learning, your culture will change. And so we want to start to talk about culture. That's a thing that we're going to talk about. However, we're still going to stay pretty tight to teaching and learning for another week at least. Now, in the Rethinking Readiness book, though, we're going to pull in some more stuff there. So definitely please check out chapter 7, sort of a deep dive in this concept of ambitious teaching. Sometimes this kind of stuff gets labeled that way. And that is not going to stay tight to project-based learning, but it is going to talk about really empowering the teachers and the learners, and going for much deeper learning in the classroom with the teacher in the lead, and really serving much more in a professional role. So that is one of the 2 chapters I want us to tackle for next week. And I also would like for us to tackle chapter 3. All right, so 3 and 7 from Rethinking Readiness. Yes, Rick.
No, I was, whoops.
You're good? Good?
Yeah.
No worries. Okay, those are our 2 chapters for that, and 3 plus 4, you can go ahead and get 4, although we're not going to turn completely to culture yet. We'll come to it later. We're going to start to explore variations on this. Part of me wants to also give you chapter, let's just do it. Let's try to play some catch up and go chapter 2 also. 2, 3, and 7, rethinking readiness. Let's go ahead and bring internships in to this. We may not get all the way to internships in our work next time, but let's go ahead and start to explore that concept of work-based learning. Okay, so we got plenty of reading to do. And Donna's going to get on me on Thursday to get you the blog post that we need to be working on for this time, because the book project is still a thing. We're still going to let that thing is going to emerge over the course of this semester, so we need to be each week keep cranking out content on that. And so there'll be multiple blog post assignments this week. Sorry in advance, and I hope you enjoyed this last week where I didn't give you any. Sorry. We need to catch up to Carrie and Rick's thing. I know, Rick, you got an email on that front, and move forward into some of our next questions also.
Okay.
Multiple blog posts in this next 2-week window. Sorry, we just need to produce some content so that we have a book to publish at the end. Okay. Good. Thanks for hanging tonight, guys. And I know you're all going to go to Kentucky Sports Radio right after this and see what happened to you, Louisville. Anyway, good stuff. I will prepare for Next Gen tomorrow because the train does not stop. We're going to keep changing schools here in Louisville tomorrow. All right. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Justin, random question. Not random. Good question.
You want to get a beer? Would your wife permit that? You would have to pick me up, Andrew.
Where are you? Well, I would have to pick you up. I could pick you up.
I'm by the airport. Do you know Spring Hill Suites?
Yeah.
You don't probably know Spring. It's right behind that Crown Plaza. It's right across from the Louisville Convention Center.
Yeah. Do you want to go get a beer?
Well, yes, I want to. The question is, like, tomorrow, how bad will life be if I don't prep tonight really well?
It's your call there. Well, we definitely can. I'm
And the vertigo. I'm still worried about the vertigo.
okay.
My head is not yet in the right place. Damn, there's a lot of reasons not to, although I really sort of do want to. Oh, well, let's just hang here, chat for a minute.
Okay. Well, while you were doing that, I am drinking. Have you had Gumball Head before?